Hot in here.
How about twist the light?
Welcome to another exciting edition of American Warrior Radio, the place to be for news, notes, interviews, and current events for all issues military and veteran related. If you or someone you know has ever worn the uniform of the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, or National Guard or Reserves, you've come to the right place. American Warrior Radio, right here on the Talk to Me station, AM 1300 WMEL, and worldwide online at 1300WMEL.com, sponsored as always by AVET Project. Folks, this program is all about supporting our troops and their families, both past and present. So please get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee, maybe an iced tea because it is warm out there here on the Space Coast, and please grab a pencil and paper to jot down a note or two because we're always efforting to bring you important information that you can use and share with others. Now, with that being said, let's roll down the runway and get this show off the ground. Y'all know me. I'm Garen Cohn. I'm an Air Force veteran, a retired legal advocate for veterans, and founder of AVET Project. But you also know I never fly through the airwaves alone.
Good morning. You know me too. I'm Glenn McGuffey, manager of your Brevard County Veteran Services team for 2 days, 2 work days and a wake up. And then I'm retiring 31 July. But we'll still be here with you on American Warrior Radio. So we want to rock and roll today, and I think what you'll find is going to go on is like I used to say many years ago when we did this show at 6:30 in the morning before Garen even came to Brevard County.
That's right. For those who served was the program.
That's right. And we're going to do a potpourri, or Chris, my co-host at that time, for him to understand I had to say potpourri of veterans benefit information. So let's rock and roll and get it started there, Garen.
Well, I have to mention, so you said 2 days and wake up. Now, you got to say something like that when you were coming out of Vietnam and presumably when you were ready to retire from the Air Force. So this is actually the third time in your life you've been able to say that.
Well, that's actually true, and at this point it doesn't really matter, but it was a lot more exciting coming out of Southeast Asia.
I'm sure. Well, folks, like Glenn said, we've got a whole bunch of stuff to share with you, but if you're looking for something to do, now, you know, we've talked about this whole bumper sticker mentality. This is where somebody says, I support the troops, and it's beautiful. You go out and you spend your $1.50 or $2 and put the sticker on your car and say, I support the troops. Well, you know what? That's fine. That shows that you actually did care for a moment anyway. But if you really want to show that you care, here's a great way to do it. This afternoon at Camp Holly, all right, Camp Holly, which is off of 192.
Off of 192, headed west on 192. You won't miss it. It's a very nice fish camp, and that'll be on your left-hand side, headed west.
Exactly. Well, we recently had a soldier return from Afghanistan, and folks, a rocket-propelled grenade took both of his legs. He's still up there at Walter Reed getting treatment and what have you, but this is a massive fundraiser put on by a bunch of really great people. A lot of them ride motorcycles, but if you're driving a car, please get out there. It begins at 3 o'clock, and this is to benefit Justin Burdett and his family. 3 o'clock this afternoon. There's going to be music, food, fun, all kinds of different things. Please get out there and support this very important mission to help this family overcome the obvious obstacles they're going to face as he tries to reintegrate back into civilian life.
Oh, absolutely. And just a side note on that, did you know out there that improvised explosive devices, IEDs, are the leading cause of injury? How leading are they? 62% of 10,500 battle injuries were caused by IEDs.
And this is after the military recognized that they needed to up armor some of these vehicles, and the MRAP, the mine resistant ambush protected,
Right.
it has a V bottom that's supposed to deflect the blast. Well, we've shared with you before, Sergeant Nicholas McKenzie, he did get promoted. Now he's out of service, but he was in one, and he suffered catastrophic injuries, seriously, even though he was inside this up-armored vehicle. So, Glenn, we can't drive that point home hard enough that no matter what you're in, these things are deadly.
Oh, absolutely. And those up-armored vehicles, MRAP, if you want to use that term, does not stop the injuries from concussions. And that's the
TBI.
big cause of the injuries. Is the closer you are to the blast, the more overpressure you get from the concussion, and the more extensive your injuries will be, and that's kind of what happened to him.
Well, and I think it's kind of a neat segue here, because Dr. Stephen Scott, which you have little to share about, speaks, and he's a wonderful man. He's head of the Polytrauma TBI Clinic over in Tampa with James Haley, or what is it, not James Haley, what's the other hospital over there?
Yeah,
that's
it is.
Okay, James Haley.
Polytrauma.
Yeah, okay, and they've got
That's
a new
separate
wing.
new
Right.
wing there.
Yep, new wing there. Well, as he speaks, and he's just such a wonderful man, he talks about what you were mentioning, but also the compression fractures, you know?
Exactly.
It has catastrophic effect on your body.
And of course that leads to the signature injury of these wars,
Which is?
unfortunately, and that's TBI, traumatic brain injury, caused by the overpressure, caused by the concussive forces of an explosive device. And I mean, you could be some distance away, a few hundred yards, and sometimes still suffer these problems.
Exactly, have your eardrums blown
Oh,
out
yeah,
and bleeding.
yeah.
And it's just it's an interesting fact that 60-some% plus are due to the IEDs. So it's clearly the biggest foe they face out there.
Yeah, and I mean, it's terrorism at its finest, if you will.
Cowardly.
Yeah, cowardly. They don't have to risk their life to do it. They'd set it off normally by some kind of telephone, usually.
Or pressure plate.
Cell phone or pressure plate. Yeah, good point. And talking about that, Dr. Scott showed some fantastic slides of some of the treatment modalities that they're using in the polytrauma unit right now. One of them that was really fascinating was show the young man with his brain swollen up to about twice the size of what the brain's supposed to be. And so what do? They cut out a section of his skull and let the brain expand through that until the normal body suddenly, not suddenly, but eventually shrinks itself back down to fit in the hole. Then they make a plate for the part of the skull they've done it, and that's a replacement part, and that's just fascinating. And they're doing other things, and I'll cover a couple of those in a couple of minutes here. That some of the sci-fi stuff they're dabbling in to help our troops that have been
but
traumatically injured.
Putting that metal plate in their head. Forever subjects are brave warriors, both men and women, to special screening at the TSA whenever they take a flight.
Yeah, and you would think we could come up with some kind of get out of jail card for these people to show TSA so they are not unnecessarily screened. I'll be kind.
Yeah, exactly. And there are some folks up in Washington are working to revise some of these protocols, but you've all heard it in the news how our warriors are being subjected to really ridiculous amounts of screening. And heck, what's the gal, Napolitano, even warned. And again, we don't want to get into politics, folks, but this is a fact. She came out and said that one of our biggest threats was domestic terrorism due to our veterans coming home.
And where in the world did she get that from? And I want to see the backup, and I want to see the facts that support that. You take that to a court of law, and you'll have it rammed down your throat big time.
Being kind also. Or run up somewhere else.
Yes.
But that's
your
kind
nose.
That's kind of the temperament and mood of some of these folks that have never been in combat. Now look, folks, I've never been in combat, but I have been around enough people and I have served as a representative for enough combat warriors to get a sense, some empathy of what they go through, especially after the fact. I've never been in that setting, thank God. But when I see and hear the stories of these brave men and women that have been subjected to, circumstances and situations far beyond what the normal person will ever experience, it leaves a permanent scar in their brain aside from the TBI. And what do we call that, Glenn?
A traumatic brain injury.
But the PTSD is what I'm
well,
getting
well, okay, yeah.
Because you mentioned signature wound is the TBI, but
right.
If you're in an MRAP...
Post-traumatic stress disorder is probably more prevalent, unfortunately, than the TBI is, because there are numbers of causative factors, not necessarily because you have traumatic brain injury that also cause PTSD. Certainly, one of the facets of TBI is post-traumatic stress disorder. That's one of the 8 or 9 categories that they rate you on. It's a really weird rating system, and whichever one you get the highest percent on is what they rate your entire TBI as. They don't combine them. I guess they're calling that pyramiding. I'm not real sure.
Okay, which is prohibited under the Code of Federal Regulations. But our producer Kim just handed me a note. So how does a combat vet or any veteran file a claim for TBI? What's necessary in order to make it well-grounded?
Well, what's necessary to make it well-grounded, of course, is that, and I'm sure there would be, if you've got TBI.
Should we go back and say what well-grounded means?
Yeah, well-grounded claim is one that the VA says we're going to look at this, we're going to do a compensation and pension thing to gather evidence to help support the claim, hopefully. But a well-grounded claim is a 3-pronged process. It's one, you have to have documentation of treatment in your service medical records of the problem you are claiming as a disability. It has to exist today, so you have to provide evidence you've got it today. If you're using the VA for health care, that's easy because they'll pull that out of the record electronically.
Records. Sure.
And then there has to be a connection, and the connection is normally accomplished by getting your current primary care doctor or specialist to say it's their opinion that it's as likely as not, 50-50 or greater, that the injury you have today is related back or caused by the injury you suffered on active duty, or illness it could be.
Sure.
So that's a well-grounded claim. 3-step process. Service treatment records exist today, and you got medical connection between the two. And what I was starting to say there, and it's worth saying, is the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be to get that nexus.
Even though it's a very low legal threshold, folks, and this is one part of the veterans
lowest
law.
in jurisprudence.
Exactly. That means it's a 50-50 proposition. Your doctor does not have to hang their head out on the chopping block saying, yeah, I'm not sure, yeah. No, it is at least as likely as not.
Right.
That's what you just said.
That's the language the court put out.
Right, but if they say it's as likely or more likely, then you're golden.
Oh yeah, that's wonderful. When I read those, I go, yay. when I read what I can interpret as 50-50, I go, yay, but I'm thinking the eyes are in the beholder of the adjudicator, and that sometimes depends on who you get as an adjudicator, to be quite honest.
You're just being truthful, but because there's a reasonable doubt doctrine that says that if your evidence in support of your claim is equal to the evidence the VA establishes against your claim, they have to grant to the veteran. But let me tell you, folks, Glenn and I both know that doesn't happen.
No, they blow that off. They put they cut and paste that and stick it in your rating decision. Well, they didn't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They give you part of the reason why they did the rating in the cover letter, the new modified cover letter.
And isn't it a joy?
And part of the reason in the rating decision, which is the rating decision probably used to average 8 or 10 pages.
Because it quoted the law.
Now they're maybe 3 pages if you count front and back as a separate page. Yeah. And you absolutely have to have training in the VA system, because, like I'm saying, the cover letter has all this stuff about why they did something, but it's coded. No nexus. You didn't have that connection.
Like anybody's going to know what NONEX means.
What is that? The fire suit for NASCAR drivers? And then part of it's over in the rating decision. Very very uninforming. And I don't know why the Court of Veterans Appeals haven't crushed them on that, because before they came to this new system,
They had to spell it out.
they had to spell
Item
it
by
out,
item.
by item, tell you where they got it from in the Code of Federal Regulations or the USC or both.
They're only serving their own purposes for efficiency's sake, rather than informing the vet what they may need to come up with to better ground their claim.
Yeah, and an unfortunate offshoot of this is all the veterans who file their own claim and don't ever seek any help from an accredited
Credentialed service officer.
credentialed service officer don't know what they're talking about, so they don't appeal because they don't understand it, and what they know is they said no.
Exactly, so I'm going to give
But I don't know why they said no, so I don't know if I have grounds to appeal it or not.
Right, so they crumple it up, throw it in file 13. But getting back to the TBI, so you explained what well-grounded means. Now here's, let's say, a young warrior coming back. Certainly Justin Burdett has got some traumatic brain injury.
Absolutely.
If you've gotten your legs cut out from below you, you suffered some serious blast, okay?
Absolutely.
So the polytrauma clinic, so what do they need to file a claim for compensation for TBI? How does that process work?
Well, there's a new form called a 21526 easy, VA form 21526 easy. You need that. If you're married, you need a copy of your marriage license. If there's been previous marriages for either party, you need documentation, or at least the data supporting the who, what, where, and when of the previous marriages and how they dissolved, who, what, where, and when on that. And if you have your service treatment records, make a copy of that to submit with the claim. You may not always have those. If the VA is treating you, like I said, just make them aware that the VA is treating you, and they will get those records through the computer electronically. If you have private treatment records, you yourself need to go get those records, copies of them, so they can be submitted with the claim. Don't give the VA, there's a form that can be used as a release of information for the VA to write. 2 times they'll try to get the information off from your doctor. But guess what happens if you use that form? You automatically can't use the fully developed claim, which is the new process to try and speed things up. Quite honestly, it's so new, we haven't had a person rated under it yet, so I don't know how long it's taking to do it. But it promises to be a lot faster. So I do know one feedback on that. Let me interject there, and that the head of the DAV National Service Team in the St. Petersburg office said it's taken 94 days for a fully developed claim.
Which, you know, we can dissect that a lot, I'm sure.
Well,
the bottom line,
it's faster, a lot faster.
Right. But what I'm getting at with this whole 21, 41, 42, where you say, okay, go out and get my medical records,
Right.
You're going to exclude yourself from that kind of consideration. So like Glenn said, if you have medical records on the outside from some outside provider outside the VA, then it's incumbent upon you to go get those records and submit them as a nice, tight packet, right?
That's right, and if you do the route where you do that form that Garen's talking about, and the VA writes to your doctor and asks for the records, and the doctor's one of those who will cooperate, they won't all send the records.
That's a fact, Jack.
But if it's one that cooperates and sends some treatment records to them, what do they send to them? Does it support your claim? Is it even relevant to your claim?
Yep.
You
That's
know,
an
you need
excellent
to get
point.
that, look at it yourself, and then have somebody that knows what they're looking at, like me.
Exactly.
Look at that.
And
Credential service officer can look at those things and see if they're relevant, because there is part of the whole claims process, laws and regulations and manuals that says you are not required to submit anything against your claim.
right, and you won't know that unless you have the experience to interpret what these reports say.
Yeah, they're a little better nowadays. They usually end up going to a stenographer or whatever you call them somewhere, and it gets typed.
Right, rather than the chicken scrawl doctors.
Yeah,
use.
the old ones. But I after 22 plus years, I've gotten pretty good at reading some of those you got to have a course in medical abbreviation to read it. That's
Yep.
really the key.
It's true. Medical terminology is so important in trying to decipher what the heck the doctor's saying.
That's right.
And you pick up on key words as you go through the medical record.
Yeah, SX. What's that? Oh, that's symptoms.
Yeah, DX diagnosis.
Right.
There's all kinds of different things. So the bottom line, if you were exposed to a blast, even if you were 100 yards away possibly.
Sure.
Depending on the amount of the blast, if that's the magnitude of the blast.
Yeah, the amount of explosives involved in the blast.
And you get your brain joggled around inside your skull, then you may potentially have traumatic brain injury.
Oh yeah, and one of my favorite PAs from the VA that comes and talks to us over on the West Coast from time to time, and he says, you guys know it because you talk to these guys in the office, and you know they get up and they shake their head, and they're back in combat. You know, and
well, you'd be a malingerer if you didn't go.
That's right, but the injury's there, and it's not going away, and it's going to continue to worsen.
And that's a very important point, because a lot of soldiers, even though they may be suffering sleeplessness, or they may even be vomiting, or whatever the symptom is that's manifesting from having this concussive blast inside their head.
Migraine headaches.
Yep. All those things, the command doesn't care. You're a soldier with a rifle. Get back out there and do your job.
Exactly.
And if you don't, we're going to bring you up on malingering charges.
Well, that certainly can happen. I think they're getting more educated about what's going on. But, you know, when you're in the middle of combat, let me tell you, the first thing that each soldier out there thinks of is take care of my buddy and take care of myself. And if I'm laying here after I got knocked down, I'm not taking care of my responsibilities. I'm getting up and get with it.
Exactly. So those are, you know, kind of the reasons why somebody may shake it off as well. Even if it was a bump on the head, you can get a traumatic brain injury from falling off a half track or something. I mean,
absolutely, and you know, and that kind of thought process in our soldiers is why you should salute every one of them every day.
Thank you.
Because we're running around free and living a free life and have freedom of choice and all those other freedoms. And that's because of young men and women like that.
You're sitting there on the other side of this microphone out there in Radio Land listening because of all of the brave men and women who have served this country honorably and making sure that the war never comes to our shores.
Exactly. And if you haven't given it a lot of thought, that's one of the primary reasons we're there.
No kidding.
It's not to gain territory or take resources or any of that kind of stuff. It's to keep the battle over there.
That's right, folks. Hope you're enjoying this episode. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Stick with us on American Warrior Radio right here on AM 1300 WMEL. Back in a flash. I gotta see what's burning. Something's burning up there. That's all we need.